Welcome to The Politics People. My guest today is a broadcaster. He's the author of over 40 books. He's a journalist, a publisher, former political lobbyist, and one of the most important commentators and pundits currently on the scene. His evening show on LBC in the UK is required listening, and for anyone who is serious about politics. I'm talking today to Iain Dale. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hi, Paul.
Now, look, the theory that I'm flogging to death is that the commentators and pundits have had more impact on policy over the last decade than the elected politicians. That's globally. But are you conscious of how much influence you've had in UK politics?
I think that's for others to judge. I mean, I think as a commentator you can influence around the margins, but you kind of have to be in the game to really have influence. And that's, I guess, why I wanted to be a Member of Parliament originally. I stood for Parliament in 2005, but the electorate fought back, the bastards.
And you need a new electorate.
Since then, pardon?
We need to replace the electorate. They always do.
Yeah, I think so too. The people knew not what they did. And I've been doing commentary, I suppose, for the last 15 years in one way or another. And yes, I think in some issues where you've got access, you can effect a bit of change. I'll give you an example. The other day, I've got a shareholding in a new startup business which sells forestry machinery, believe it or not. And the guy that runs it had applied for one of these bounce back loans during coronavirus, and he was getting nowhere with HSBC. They were fobbing him off, whereas the government was saying, oh yeah, you can get them within 48 hours. So I just texted the Chancellor of the Exchequer's special advisor and said, you might want to know that HSBC need a bit of a kick up the arse here. And I think they got that proverbial kick up the arse. And I think HSBC now have actually played ball with people. And sort of my colleague got his loan about 48 hours later. Now, I've got no idea whether that had anything to do with being prodded to by the Chancellor's office, but they were really interested in the whole way he'd set up the business, and they were on the phone to him for like an hour. They were sort of soaking up information about what it's like to run a small business in this environment. So you can have a little bit of influence in that way. I can't say whether I've had any influence on the whole Brexit process or anything like that. I'd like to think one or two of my interviews have had a bit of an impact, but that's for others.
No, fair enough. You can. It can be left to others. I'm going to be the others for a moment and say that from where I'm standing, you've actually been hugely influential. I think. See, the politics has gone very populist and very shouty and quite extreme in the last decade, shall we say, or at least it's come to prominence. And what I see with you is like you're this kind of intellectual, conservative, silent assassin, if you like. Oh, you are. I mean, see,
honestly, I have never been called intellectual in my life. I'm not an intellectual. I'm very far from being intellectual. In fact, I'm quite jealous of people who write in a sort of more of an intellectual way. I just don't, and I don't consider myself in that game at all.
No, I know. Look, I don't want to come to blows on this. I'm praising you. I'm just saying, I think that the voice, the sobriety that you brought. Look, so what I'm saying is like from an outsider's point of view, when you had the rise of the Katies and the Tommies and stuff in the last 10 years, it was almost like Punch and Judy approach to conservative politics in the media anyway. And you were able to go and stand your ground in things like Question Time, those kind of platforms, which again took on a huge influence during the Brexit debates. But you were able to go in there and stand your ground without resorting to two-dimensional populist tricks, if you like, without sort of creating baying mobs. I think that was hugely influential because I think that you brought a lot of on the fence voters over to the Brexit side.
Well, I think because I'm not a particularly shouty person, I do understand that there is another point of view, and I respect another point of view, even if I don't agree with it. And I think somebody on Newsnight once said, when I said, "Why do you have me on so often?" Because even I think I'm on your programme too often. And they said, "Well, we think of you as the thinking man's Brexiteer," which I actually took as a huge compliment, because the problem is that when you're on one side of a very divisive argument, you can come across as being very hardline, right, almost as an extremist. And we all know the people that we're talking about on the Brexit side of the debate: Mark Francois, Andrew Bridgen, people like that, who I don't think persuaded anyone of their views during that. They were the ultras. And okay, if you're in a campaign, you need some ultras. I'm not actually criticising them, but I think what I may have brought to it was a little bit more, well, I hope likability in some ways, and actually made people sit up and think a little bit about some of their preconceived ideas about why we should remain in the EU. And I think when you go on programmes like Question Time, Any Questions, or Newsnight, you don't want to come across as just towing a party line. I didn't tow any party line. There were some things I did. For instance, I am as wet as a lettuce on immigration. I did not vote for Brexit to stop immigration. I know some people did, but I did not. Freedom of movement was never a particular issue with me, and I was quite happy to say that. And it kind of goes against the narrative that people like to create, where you only voted Brexit because either you were thick, stupid, or anti-immigrant or racist. Well, I'm not thick, I'm not stupid, I'm also not anti-immigration, and I'm certainly not a racist. So I think the Remainers found me quite difficult to handle from that point of view.
Yeah, look, I think it's a long-winded way of just agreeing with me. That's exactly the point. That's the position that you have attained in the UK. And I'm in Los Angeles. I've been here like 12 years. I was actually one of the only people, I think, that could vote for Trump and Brexit. So I'm in this weird kind of position of having the binary votes going on. But yeah, it's you personally, from what I'm reading. I mean, you were saying it's like you might be surprised that you've bought a forestry business. It's like, I'm not surprised. Looking at your biog, it's like Dragon's Den or something. You have so many fingers in so many pies. You seem to be a real business, a real operator in business as well as media, as well as politics. So I'm not surprised by that. But how do you link all these things together, or is it just anything that takes your fancy?
Well, I have been involved in quite a lot of startups along the way. I think I've either started up or run 7 or 8 different businesses, but I've never really made any money out of them. So I'm not going to say I've been very successful. I tend to do things that I enjoy doing rather than with the objective of making a lot of money. And that can be a good thing, but I'm not driven by money. I've had the opportunity to make money along the way, and each time declined it. I mean, I remember turning down a job as public affairs manager for the Port of Tilbury just before they were privatised. And I mean, I would have made hundreds of thousands had I taken that job, but I knew I wouldn't enjoy it. And I like to do work that I enjoy. So I'm not. Tony Benn once called me his favourite Thatcherite entrepreneur.
There you go.
And I said, Tony, how many other Thatcherite entrepreneurs do you actually know? And he admitted he didn't know any. And I mean, business is difficult. It's actually that there are so many responsibilities when you run a business. And I was acutely aware when I was running Politico's bookshop, 20 years ago now, that I was in control of the lives of 12 people that I employed. When I was running Bite Back or Total Politics magazine, the same. If I made the wrong decision, they would all be out of a job the next day. And in the end, that's what made me think I don't want to run a company anymore. I'm quite happy. I love doing the radio. It's the best job I've ever had, but I don't want to have that responsibility any longer. It was part of the reason why I gave up Buyback Publishing, 2 years ago this week, actually. And there were other reasons too, but that was certainly one of them, where I just felt I'd had enough of it. And if you're in books and publishing, you know that you're never going to make any money. It's always the cash flows for a small publishing company are always going to be tight.
Right.
So it was just time to move on from that.
And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure how many people are aware of things that you've just mentioned in passing. The Politico's bookstore. Did you found that, or did you end up running it?
I founded it because, very briefly, I was part of a transport lobbying. Sorry, I'm going to cough.
If only I had a cough button.
I was part of a transport lobbying consultancy called the Waterfront Partnership, which I'd started with a colleague in 1990. It's going incredibly well. We had a conference organising company as an offshoot of it, which I started and ran. And then my colleague brought in his wife to essentially run the office. And I'd always gotten really well with her, but she was a nightmare from hell at work. And she tried to make me sack all of the people that worked directly to me because she thought they were all incompetent. I refused. And in the end, well, what was he going to do? Pick his wife or me? So I ended up leaving and thought, well, what do I do now? And I'd been to Washington a couple of times and seen a store called Political Americana.
Right.
It wasn't a bookshop particularly, but it was all sorts of political memorabilia, knickknacks, campaign badges, that sort of thing. And I thought, why isn't there one of these in London? So to cut long story short, I decided to open one. It was just before the 97 election when Tony Blair won. And it was fantastic. It became a real magnet in the Westminster Village. We did a lot of book launch events there. You have cabinet ministers coming in all the time, people who worked in Parliament. It was a real destination shop for people who were coming into London from outside. And it was great fun to run. But then we started a publishing company as well at the time. And our first product was actually a video called Party Political Broadcasts, The Greatest Hits. And that was so successful that we plowed all the profits from that into publishing lots of books. And that's where the publishing company started. But after 7 years, the congestion charge in London was brought in. Amazon started and was really eating into trade. And the landlord increased the rent by 50%. And I thought, you know what, I can survive for a couple of years, but not for 5 years. So I decided to put it online only, which was a really big decision. But it was the right decision. It was one of my better decisions in my life. And even it wasn't fun running it online, so I sold it in the end a couple of years later. Yeah, that was a really lovely time in my life. I absolutely loved running the shop.
Yeah, and it was a huge place. It was hugely important to me, actually. I used to go there a lot, and I probably kept you in ivory back scratches for a while. But it's this idea that you've, and I wasn't going to bring this up actually, but it is that combination of entrepreneurialism with politics. I mean, basically, if you did that in 97, that was foreshadowing this whole kind of politics as showbiz, this, political junkie kind of movement that's grown up. I mean, people weren't, to me, they didn't seem that bothered about politics since Thatcher, really. It was just, certainly through the major years, but this idea that it's become Instagrammable, if you like, it's like that was you almost anticipating that with a bookstore of memorabilia. It wasn't a dry place. It was a fun place to be. It was an interesting, eclectic store.
Yeah, I mean, it was predominantly books, all sorts of different political books. I mean, humour, theory, whatever. But we sold political mugs, postcards, memorabilia, CDs, videos, whatever. I mean, if it was political, we would sell it. And I think in some ways it was a little bit ahead of its time because it was playing to a niche. And we all know that in this internet mad world, niche is king. If you can market into a niche, you will have a successful operation. And I've kind of started to revive it now. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen I've started selling political mugs,
Right.
which I did rather by accident, because I've got a new book coming out. It's supposed to be out this week, actually, but it's been postponed till August. And I thought, well, I'm sure there'll be people who want signed copies. So I thought, well, how can I sell signed copies on the net? So I discovered this site called iZettle, which is run by PayPal. And I thought, well, I'll just create a one-page online shop. And then I thought, I've got all of this old stock from Politicos in the barn. Why don't I start flogging that? So I started flogging the New Labour and Proud of It mugs, the Margaret Thatcher Now More Than Ever mug. And they went like hotcakes. So I thought, well, I'll commission some new ones. So I did. And honestly, I watch television. When I finish my radio show at 10 o'clock in the evening, I have my dinner, sit down, watch television. And while I'm watching television, I'm packing up mugs to send out to people who've ordered them. It's such a glamorous life, Paul.
No, I love it. Well, exactly. You're living large. You're living your best life in the media. And also shipping out to Kuala Lumpur in the middle of the evening. That's fantastic. So you are like one of the most prominent and respected conservative voices as well in the media. Are you like allowed into the media gang, or am I oversimplifying? Like there would be any kind of tribalism? Are you part of? Are you friends with people of opposing views in the media, or are they very standoffish?
That's a really good question. I've never wanted to be part of the media gang. I've always resisted having a lobby pass. Even when I really started my blog back in the early 2000s, and when it really took on a life of its own, 2005 to 2010. People kept saying, "Oh, you should get a lobby pass." And I thought, "Well, why do I need a lobby pass? I don't need to go and sit in the gallery. I don't need to go and. So if I want to go into Parliament, I can do so." So I've never, if I wanted to be a lobby journalist, I would have been a lobby journalist. It's never attracted me. I couldn't do the 6 o'clock on a Saturday night phone call to the minister who's shagging his secretary. I just couldn't do that. So I've gone a different path. I am people see me as part of a sort of insidery political gang, but I don't really feel that. I don't have many friends. What's a friend? How do you class a friend nowadays? I have a lot of acquaintances in the media. I have people that if I'm at a party conference, I'll go out to dinner with them. But there aren't many people in the media whose houses I've been to or I invite to my house. I don't really operate in that kind of world. I said to someone the other day that I reckon in politics, in 25 years, I probably made 5 friends. Now, that might say more about me than it does about anybody else, but it's not... You can be flavour of the month in politics and the media, and then if your circumstances change, people drop you like a stone, and that does tell you who your friends are. And I do gravitate to people who've fallen on hard times. I mean, there's a couple of journalists in recent months who have gone through some pretty terrible experiences, and I always try and make sure that I ring them up, keep in touch with them, try and help them, because it can be a very lonely place to be when you've been part of a scandal, whether you're a politician or a journalist. And I make it my business to make sure that people know that just because they've been through a scandal or fallen on hard times, I don't desert people in those circumstances. And I suppose that is a form of friendship, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely, yeah. It does you credit. It's it's just an interesting. I come out of the comedy world in the UK. I was like in representation and production and writing and all that, and it was often said that the best place to be in show business is warm, as opposed to ever being hot.
Yes.
If you're warm, it just you have this relentless career, and you become part of the furniture, and in not a disparaging way, but because people like their furniture. But you never spike, and if you never spike, there's no chance of you being ousted.
Yeah, it's boring though, isn't it? I mean, you become, well, you sort of become the, how shall I put this? Rather than the Leeds United, who've been at the top and now obviously not so much, you're a Southampton, where you're kind of always mid-table mediocrity. There's no fun in that.
See, I'm Welsh. When I was growing up, we never had. You only played football when the rugby field was incapacitated, and so no frame of reference.
I don't get rugby at all.
No, I
don't get rugby at all.
I didn't either. I'll be honest. It's just, and so I've only ever been to one football match in my life. So I hear these things, and I'm like, oh, that sounds bad. But I'm just as confused with the LA Dodgers as I am with West Ham. So I've got no idea.
All right.
But no, it's it's. Listen, I'm not that ignorant. I get what you mean. Yeah, and it's like I said, you've got this position. I'm not trying to blow smoke, but you've got this position where the more I read into you, you are absolutely everywhere, hugely respected, and have had all these affiliated businesses that for me were hugely influential and hugely ahead of their time. See, I was going to say, like, you're very, very professional. I wanted to come on to the fact you don't seem to suffer fools as well, but I'm going to do that next if that's all right. It's except this one. But you're very professional, knowledgeable about politics. Like, the publishing industry from soup to nuts, for instance. You can run businesses and not just be the pretty face that you are. Skilled in broadcasting. You're a live promoter as well. I mean, you created the shows like Evening with Anne Widdecombe.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you've got real skills. You've got real transferable skills. Now, I'm just saying, do you kind of arch an eyebrow now at the sudden arrival of all these sort of two bob pundits who've suddenly arrived on the scene with not a hint of groundwork to their name?
Not really. I think it's partly because I have the attention span of a flea. I like doing lots of different things.
Right.
I kind of always need something new in my life, whether it's writing a book or whether it's doing a 24 show run at the Edinburgh Fringe last year. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, I never thought I'd be doing something like that. So I like to have a bit of a challenge. The one thing that the coronavirus crisis has done, though, it's actually made me slightly reevaluate things, in that I've been at home now for 77 days because I'm a type 2 diabetic. And I have enjoyed not having to go to London 4 days a week.
Right.
And I am thinking, I mean, I'm 57, 58 next month. I'm not thinking of retiring because I don't think I could ever really retire. But I am thinking about work-life balance, and maybe I'm seeing as I have enjoyed being at home so much and actually catching up with a lot of things I haven't been able to do for years. Maybe I will think about how my life should operate in the future. And I think a lot of people are going through this at the moment. People who never thought they would enjoy working at home, and employers who never thought they could trust their employees to work from home, and have suddenly found that maybe they don't need the 3,000 square feet of office space that they've got, and that they can trust people to maybe work at home 2-3 days a week. This is going to have a tremendous effect on the whole economy in the end, and the way we live our lives.
Absolutely. That concentration of value in London property is so fueled by needing to be in that proximity that even if 10% of that changes, that's going to have a huge effect on the UK economy, because, a lot of the wealth in the UK is London property, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it will free up a lot more property for living accommodation as well, which, I mean, frankly, is already happening. There's a lot of office space being, and that's why the office rentals in London are sky high still, because there's less of it, and it's all being developed for residential use.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Los Angeles now for the last 12 years, and it's not made a jot of difference to my dealings with the UK. I mean, I've not had to, actually broadcast shows on LBC or anything, but time difference aside, the technology's been there even for the last 12 years to have meaningful business meetings every day with the UK, or in fact anywhere around the world. It is that thing of the technology does decide. I mean, people came in from the fields for the Industrial Revolution. Well, they can go back to the fields now because they are all connected by some version of ISDN or the equivalent.
Yeah, quite.
So Talking of it, so this rise in populism over the last few years, and again, from where I'm standing, you've sort of navigated it better than some others. Some people have really drunk the Kool-Aid and made sort of, I don't know, made asses of themselves in many ways by trying to jump on a bandwagon. But you've stayed very sort of your own man in that sort of populist surge. It's like so am I right that this is a long-winded way of saying, am I right that you won't have like Tommy Robinson on your show? Did I read that?
No, I won't. I mean, I have a very limited little black book of people I won't have on my show, but he is one of the people. I mean, he has been on because in my early days on LBC, he would phone in. And he's a very, very articulate guy, a very intelligent guy in many ways. And if he could only channel his intelligence to the right cause, he could be quite formidable. But I'm afraid that I won't give space to people who articulate his sort of views on my show. He is so divisive. He pretends that he's not really anti-Islam at all, but you just have to look at some of the things he says and does, and I'm not going to give him the oxygen of publicity.
No, it's really interesting, and as I'm saying, that's a temptation that you've resisted that many others didn't because of the...
I'm not comparing him to Anjem Chowdhury, but right. I remember interviewing Anjem Chowdhury back in, 2011. And he's another one that can, he'll swear the sky is black rather than blue and give a very articulate way of explaining why. Right. And I mean, this interview is still on YouTube somewhere. And I think I more than held my own in this interview. But I remember thinking afterwards, that's the last time I'm ever going to do that, because this guy is sinister, he's dangerous, and he should not be given publicity by the mainstream media. And I got very angry when I kept seeing him pop up on Newsnight as supposedly a representative of Muslim views. He spoke for no one apart from some lunatic fringes. And I think the media does have a responsibility here. It's not, I mean, it's a difficult path to tread, because people could equally say, well, you've interviewed Nick Griffin on your programme, why wouldn't you interview Tommy Robinson? And they're absolutely right. The difference is that Nick Griffin actually had elected representatives in the European Parliament at the time. Tommy Robinson was and is a figurehead for some very, very dark people on the far right of British politics. And you kind of almost just have to look at them to know that. And I've got better things to do than interview him. Can we talk about something else? We've given him far too much time already.
Sure. Yeah, no, listen, I'm pleased you brought up the Anjem Chowdhury. Yeah, it's look, this is about you, and I'm just like, I was just saying, kind of all hail you for having that integrity of, I mean, again, others can justify whatever they do or whatever stance they take, but you actually do have a line and a point of view, and you exercise that. And so I've got a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, but I don't pretend that I don't agonise over this sort of thing, because I do believe in free speech. I don't believe in sort of large amounts of censorship. I don't believe that we should be no platforming people without a very, very good reason. I mean, there are people on the far left that I won't have on either. So I'm not sort of restricting this to people who I regard as beyond the pale as racists or terrorist sympathisers. It is people who I think are incredibly divisive. And even I've got a lot of experience now in interviewing, but there will always be occasions when you think, well, that person... it's a bit like many people on the far left, and that I'm sure they attend some sort of school of how to deal with political interviews and how to just rampage their views across and not really even engage with the questions that they're being asked. You see it, this Novara Media crew, for example, they are brilliant at it. And I mean, I haven't banned them, but they are no longer relevant now that Jeremy Corbyn is no longer leader of the Labour Party. So they don't appear as much on my show as they would have done. It's all a matter of judgment, and I don't pretend that I always get it right.
Yeah, but like I said, that's to your credit, I think. I'll get off the subject and we'll leave it with this. It's just, I remember Oprah had a similar thing where she had white supremacists on in the 80s still, when she was, when the show was building popularity. And after she did it, it's just like, I don't care about ratings. I'm never doing that again. I'm not going to have that. That's just a circus, you know. And like I said, I think it takes some nerve, because as you point out, the BBC perhaps didn't adhere to the same kind of editorial line.
That it's incredibly important, that, because if I was just interested in chasing ratings, I would be doing phone-ins every day on those sort of touchstone subjects: immigration, abortion, Israel, homosexuality, blah blah blah. Now, I'm not saying I don't do any of those, but I only do it if there's a really good news reason to do so. I get far more of a kick nowadays of covering things like that are emotional, like mental health issues. I know now that I can deal with emotional people on the radio, and I get a real kick out of that. I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't pretend to be one, but people know they will get a good hearing with me, that I'm not going to shout at them. I've got a calming voice. I think I can. I mean, I have talked people down from taking their own lives before, once or twice on the radio, and once or twice in other circumstances. So I think if you know that you can do that sort of thing, you need to use that quite in a really good way. Use it so people realise that they are not alone. When they phone up a radio station, they're actually doing a service themselves by telling people, look, there are other people like you. Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summing up of how I see your position in this whole thing. It takes me back to the beginning of the interview. I'm saying it's like you definitely are a voice for politically people perhaps who were sitting on the fence, you know, who didn't feel like an extremist in either area. I'm going to be so crass now. I can't thank you enough for the time you've given me, but I've got to ask about the walkout recently. Are you prepared to talk about that? Because that was just brilliant.
Well, Good Morning Britain. I mean, I love going on Good Morning Britain because I like the hosts, Ben Shepherd, Kate Garraway, Charlotte Hawkins. You get about 15 minutes. I'm on with Jackie Smith, my compatriot in the For the Many podcast. And our relationship works really well. I mean, people think there's something going on with me and Jackie. I think there's a bit of sort of Sybil Shepherd, Bruce Willis sexual chemistry going on there somewhere.
Just more glamorous.
Yeah, quite, exactly. The viewers really took to us, and so we do every Friday. They've asked us to do more often, but I just can't get up at that hour of the morning more than once a week. And that week, Jackie was on holiday. What I refer to as her swingers holiday in India. She refers to it as a singles holiday. So they put me on with Grace Blakely, who, for those who don't know Grace, she's very articulate, young female economist. And she isn't part of Novara Media, but she's very sort of Corbyn sympathising, but a little bit Brexity as well. And she came on my radio show one day, and I really rated her. I didn't agree with the words she said, but she said it all very well. And I started recommending her to programmes like Good Morning Britain and Newsnight to have on, just a different face, a different voice. Anyway, she was on with me that morning, and I got to the green room, and they said, we're putting you on with Nihal from 5 Live. Now, I didn't know him. I'd never met him, but I knew of him by reputation as being quite a lefty as well. Yeah. And then they said we were going to be talking about an incident where I think an 18-year-old had thrown a 6-year-old off a balcony at the Tate Modern. It got a huge amount of headlines at the time, and he was mentally disturbed. And I thought, well, why are we talking about that? And they said, we've got a bit of an exclusive on it. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd, because normally we'll talk about what's going on in politics. And I don't like doing it with 2 other people, because there's always one that is a bit left out. So I said to the producers, I said, look, why don't I just not go on today? Just have Grace and Nihal. That's fine. I don't mind. And they said, no, we want you to go on. So I was put in the middle of the other 2. And Grace started off she spent about a minute blaming it all on austerity. The fact this guy had thrown a 6-year-old off the roof was because of austerity. And I didn't interrupt her at all. I just let her get on with it. And then they came to me, and I said, well, I'm sorry, that's just nonsense. It's preposterous to blame the act of a mentally disturbed person on austerity. And I started to try and explain why. I think I got 9 seconds out before she interrupted. And then Nihal started, and then they started together. And I didn't flip. I just thought, I don't come here for this. I come here for a reasonable debate that can inform the viewers. This is informing nobody. So I just took my microphone off, stood up and walked out. And of course, it was written up as a hissy fit, a flounce and all the rest of it. Well, it wasn't. I was actually very calm.
You were?
I've watched it. It became quite a thing.
It became quite a thing, and it's. But I watched it forensically, and I don't even know if you remember this bit because it might have all been, sort of a bit of a blur because it was all adrenalized. But it was. You said, "All right, I'm not going to talk. Then forget it. I'm not going to talk."
Yeah.
And Nihal, under his breath to you, said, "Good, don't." I think it was like, "Good, don't," and that was what you reacted to with like, "All right, fine, I won't then," and it was just like.
Well, I think I do. I had forgotten that, but I do remember that now. And I did feel guilty because I had expected Ben and Kate to shut them up.
That's
and let
the
me
point.
Have my say.
Yeah, that was the point.
But they didn't. They didn't. Yeah. And I texted both of them. I was driving up to Norfolk afterwards, and I did put out a tweet. I can't remember what the tweet said, but it was just, I suppose I better tweet about this. I don't come on this programme to be treated like that or something like that. And I texted Ben and Kate afterwards. I said, look, I'll quite understand if you don't want me to come on the programme again. But they both rang me and said, absolutely not. We should have stopped it. And they didn't hold it against me at all. And Grace, I'm afraid then... started tweeting things that I had shouted at the female producer before we went on air. And I DM'd her and I said, what on earth are you talking about? I did nothing of the sort. She said, oh, well, Nihal told me you did. I said, so you've put that on Twitter just because he told you. And I said, look, what I'm going to do now is text the editor of the programme and ask them if the producer thought I behaved inappropriately in any way at all. And if I did, I will A, profusely apologise, and B, do it on Twitter as well. So I did that, and of course came back, no, nobody understands what she's talking about. So she then had the good grace to delete the tweet. But Nihal, I'm afraid, just acted so classlessly throughout the next few days, really laying it on thick about how I couldn't cope with the pressure and typical Tory boy and all that sort of thing. And I thought, mate, you just lack class. So I just blocked him. I've got no regrets about it at all, because I think sometimes you do have to stand up and say, up with this, I will not put. I had nearly done it last year on Question Time when they had a live edition. And again, I was being shouted down all the time by Ian Blackford. And they had 6 people on the panel, which is far too many. And the thought went through my mind, shall I just get up and leave? I'm glad I didn't, because I think on a live program like Question Time, it's very different. And it would have been, well, I don't think I would have come out of it very well, but and maybe it was because of that I did it on Good Morning Britain. I don't know, but as I say, I don't have any regrets.
No, it was perfect, and yeah, I've watched it so many times, obviously leading up to this. 'Cause it's great. It's like I've got a GIF or whatever they call it, however you pronounce the G. But it was
people did make GIFs over it.
It was very measured. I thought it was, and like I said, they're allowed to be punch and juice. It's like that Mrs. Merton thing, let's have a heated debate, But it was.
Well, do you know, my favourite thing was somebody photoshopped it all, and they dressed me up as I stood up as a big baby with a dummy in my mouth and with a speech bubble saying, "I want my mummy." But you've got to laugh.
I've got actually. Grace is coming on next week. Actually, she's on Monday.
Oh, is she? Well, give her my regards.
I will. Thank you so much. Listen, I've taken enough of your time now. I just had to get that anecdote out. I was just. I love that. I love that. I love that part of your canon of work, the body of work. That's my favourite thing at the moment. Thank you so much, Iain Dale. Honestly, it's a privilege to get you on, and I'm so grateful that you agreed to talk to me today. I just can't thank you enough.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to get rid of all that smoke you've blown up my arse throughout this interview, Paul, but it's been an absolute pleasure.
Bless you. Thank you.